Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Philanthropy. On today's episode, we will talk about how to be happy, how to become more happy. What does that look like in your life? So, the first thing I want to say is I'm happy you're here with me today. Like, if you're struggling right now to find happiness and you're feeling like this is something that you really want to work on, I'm so happy you joined me because this is like an age old question, and there's hope and there's answers and there's a way to find your happier self. And so that's what we'll work on today. So, the first thing that I would like to talk about with happiness is that sometimes we end up having this fake happy image that goes out into the universe that's all around us. And that has to do with just a lot of the messaging that's out there. That I know we did another episode earlier on positivity, and there are definitely things, to make this a skill, we want to be practicing it and that sort of thing. But the thing that I wanted to focus on is that sometimes we shun everything that's negative and we think that anything negative is bad. And so, if we want to be positive or happy, we have to ignore all of that stuff and turn our attention to happiness and positivity. And there's some truth to that, yes. However, I do think that if you really want to be truly happy, we have to address those areas in our life, the things that make us uncomfortable, the conflicts in our life, the decisions that are weighing us down. There's real benefit to doing that. And that is that when you push yourself through those areas in a good way, then you're more likely to feel the relief and joy of having addressed those issues. So I don't think that the answer to being happy is to shut out all the things that are negative and all the conflicts in our life. I don't think that's the answer. I do think that you can address them in a good way. And we'll talk about some of that stuff today. So now that that's out of the way, that's really important to me because I do hear a lot of, good vibes only, fake it till you make it, and that sort of thing. And that sort of always makes me go, this is maybe not the truest path to happiness. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to how do we get there? How do we get happy? Of course, you know me. The first thing I'm always going to say is let's meditate, right? And again, if you haven't, this is your first time tuning in, you can go back to my very first episode. We went over a very basic meditation, and I tend to talk about it through most of the episodes, at least a little bit. But if you want to figure out how to meditate, go there first or after this episode, and then you can start unlocking how to meditate. So now when we meditate, again, that's a lot of information that is revealed to us in that process, right? So we have a lot of things that are going on subconsciously. And when we bring attention to it and we focus on it through meditation, now we're going to understand those areas in our life that are maybe weighing on our hearts or weighing on our spirits. And so that's why I always say go to your meditation first, get all the information that you need. Maybe there's areas in your life that you need to focus on. Maybe there's things in your life that are feeling really good. So if you're not really sure where the trouble is in your life right now, why you're not happy, meditation will help you to get there, right? So you got to dig deep. And sometimes that's the question you put to yourself as you're about to sit down and meditate. Like, what's going on? What is holding me back from happiness right now? And you can, that can be your intention. You sit down and you start meditating, and that's your focus. What is holding me back from happiness? And you know what? Things are going to start bubbling up. They're going to start coming out, and you're going to start to understand, boy, I need to unpack some things. There's some things that are needing my attention, and that's what I want you to focus on. Because we're going to go through a list, and, you can definitely approach it very cerebrally. Like, we're going to do a checklist, and we're going to determine whether, we're kicking A in that area or where we need more attention. But the meditation piece is where we can't lie to ourselves because our spirit is talking to us. Our emotions are coming out, and that's where the truth comes out, right? Because that meditation is always your connection to your spirit. And so that's why we want to make sure that we're approaching it from that center of truth before we go into the checklist. Because otherwise, a lot of times we'll just go through a checklist and we'll say, yeah, and we're a little bit detached in that process. And I want you to really get to the truth, the crux of the matter. What is it that you need to focus on? Okay. So now I'll show you my list. But before I show you my list, I have my medicine wheel. I know I promised you, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe it's 6 or 8 episodes now. I don't know. It's been a while. And I promised you I would show you a medicine wheel. And then I didn't. I totally forgot. So I wanted to bring it today. There's one caveat to this medicine wheel. I could be totally wrong because there are a few different versions out there. And that's not to say that any of them are wrong. Again, a medicine wheel is going to be specific to the culture that it comes from. And because, all Cree communities are not the same, and Cree is different from Lakota, it is different from, Blackfoot, it is different from Dene, and some of these different groups will have their own medicine wheel. And then, there's teachings that accompany that medicine wheel. So I don't want to say that there's one standard one, but there's kind of a template for it. And it's always divided into 4 quadrants. So now this one, I think it's the correct one for where I'm from. But like I said, my elder will probably look at it. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to come back with another medicine wheel, the one that he says is correct. I didn't consult him before this drawing. So Bev or Chance, maybe show this to Jack and give me that feedback, because I know I usually always go to him, but I don't work with him every day anymore. And so I can't go to him and see, the areas that I'm completely lost in. So, Jack, if you see this, I'm going to have a whole new medicine wheel next time. But if it's okay, then it stands and I will leave it as is. So this is the one that I drew. And you can see the north is the white quadrant. The east is the yellow one, and the red one is south, and the blue one, sometimes people will say black, but I know in my area we would use blue, not black, and that's west. And so the north area, because remember, we wanted to look at why do I cover these 4 areas in philanthropy? Because we have the north, which is the spirit. We want to address the spiritual aspects of ourself. And the east is our mind, so the mental wellness that we need to focus on for holistic health. The south is our body, our physical part of our health. And of course, the west is the emotional health. So those are all of them. And like I said, if I'm wrong, I will show you the new one. It'll be updated. I'm okay with being wrong, as long as I get it right after I talk to Jack. So there's the medicine wheel, and that will help you to visualize it if you haven't gone to look at one when I recommend you do that. But that's why we are covering all of those areas in philanthropy, because again, this is a podcast about wellness, filling our cup and taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of the world, right? And so that goes perfectly with this next drawing. When I was thinking about happiness and how do we become more happy, there were certain areas that I wanted us to focus on. And really, at the end of the day, it's everything, but I'm going to show you step by step. All right, so here is my drawing on happiness. I'm sorry, this is really only me who is creating these diagrams. I don't have a team. I do everything myself. And so if you think my chart sucks, it does. I'm not going to deny that. And at some point, if I have a talented artist who can recreate this design and make it better than mine, that'd be awesome. But for now, you're just going to have to deal with my sucky drawing. I'm sorry. All right. So in the center, I have C right here, a little dot, and that is for creator. I'll talk about that one last because not everybody believes in God or believes in creator. And if you want to shut off my podcast when I go into, the creator spiel, that's okay. I won't be offended. I'm, like I said, I'm not here to convert anybody. So I'll save that one for last, but I will definitely come back to that and talk to that point. But we'll go to self. So self is on the inner circle around creator. And then the circle around that is relationships. And the outermost circle is the world. Okay, so we're going to go through all of these areas. Like I said, you can easily do a checklist. And it's good. Like I said, it'll help you to make sure if there are areas that you haven't been considering, maybe you're a little bit imbalanced in that area. But as always, go to meditation first. All right, so let's look at self. When we're looking at self, there are aspects of the self that we need to address in order to make sure that we can be happy as a human, right? So one of those areas, the first one, I will say is career or school. So your purpose. What is your purpose in life? And if you're lucky enough, you're working in that area or towards that end of whatever is your purpose in life. But sometimes people will feel that their purpose is something else and their job is just something that's a separate entity and it helps them to pay their bills. And I'm not here to judge anybody, whatever your path is. But when you can align those to, feeling like this is what I need to do in the universe, this is what my soul is longing for, you're probably going to feel more joyful if you're able to do that. Because there are definitely people who are out there and who are working and there's a detachment, right? They're doing something to make money. And then often they'll say, well, I'm just here to, do my 9 to 5 and get my check. And you'll notice that these people are often devoid of passion. Right? They're not connecting to their passions and they're not bringing those maybe to the forefront in their workplace or in school. Just doing it, to maybe have a means to survive. And again, like I said, that's not a judgment I have on anybody. But if you're wanting more happiness, that's something you might want to look at, right? So, and I'll stop here for a little bit because I often had students in my office. Like I've said before, I was a principal, I was a teacher, I was a VP, a whole bunch of education jobs. And I would have students in my office sometimes and they didn't know what they wanted to do with their life, right? And that's a really kind of guiding, pivotal conversation that you have when you're at least in high school, that you kind of know what direction you're going into. And often the students would say, oh, Miss Iron, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. And I have no idea. And so I would say, okay, stop. We're going to sit and we're going to examine how to connect to your purpose. And I do think that there are 3 main key steps to finding your purpose. Right. So the first step that I always would have my students look at is, what are your natural talents and strengths? Because we're all given something in this world. I always struggled when kids would say, oh, Nassine, I'm not good at anything. Of course you are. Every single person on this earth was given gifts. Maybe it was working with your hands. Maybe you're really, clever. Maybe, you bring a lot of joy to others. Maybe you're super funny. You have something. Everybody has something, an artistic talent. Maybe you're really good at sports. Everybody has something. So you have to think about and take stock. First and foremost, what are your gifts? What are those things that come easier to you than other people, right? That people come to you and say, how do you do that? And you're like, I don't know. That's a gift. That's a talent, right? If you can't even logically explain why you're good at that and you're just naturally good at it, that's a gift. So take stock of those. Number 1. Number 2, what are you passionate about? So I want you to sit and think about the things that naturally make you feel joyful when you're doing it. So I want you to think about, is it when you're spending time with animals, you come alive? Is it when you're sitting there and you're drawing or organizing or anything like that that makes you feel alive inside, you feel a spark inside, then that's a clue, right? So you want to look at, what are you passionate about? Those things that naturally suck in your attention and you're drawn to them and you don't know why, but there's this energy there. So I want you to consider, what are you passionate about? Okay? So you have number 1, you have your strengths and your talents, your gifts. Number 2, what are you passionate about? And number 3, now it's the time to start looking for opportunities. Because I do believe that when you are considering your purpose, doorways will start to open up for you. And it's your task to find that courage and to walk through that door and take that chance. So you're blending your talents, you're blending your passion. Now you have an opportunity, and I don't know what that'll look like. You'll know if you start paying attention to the signs of what is an opportunity. And again, that's part of the meditation where you're digging in deep, and maybe that's a question you put to yourself as you're meditating. You can ask the universe, you can ask creator, how do I find opportunities? Show me the opportunities, because maybe you're not used to doing that. Maybe it's a brand new skill to start tapping in and looking for these signs. But I do think that the universe and creator are working to support you to create that purpose and to help your soul to realize its full potential, right? And so I do think if you ask yourself those 3 things and you really sit down deep with those through meditation, of course, I'm always going to say through meditation, then you're going to start to feel like, okay, I know where I want to go with my life. I know what I want to do with my life. And for me, here I am on this podcast and actually I was looking at a journal entry that I made about a year ago, and I was talking about the things that I wanted to do, right? The things that I thought were my talents, my passion, and opportunities. And this was part of it, right? Like this all kind of fell into place, and here I am, and this message is coming out there because I did the work. I tapped in, I did that meditation, and I took stock of all those things to find my purpose. And you can too. And you know what? Honestly, I've never been happier in my life. So I think it definitely, there's some magic to it all. So give it a shot. I think you'll be delightfully surprised. All right, so that's the first one, find your purpose. And another one, health. All right, so here we're going to take stock of our health and our habits and the things that are supporting us to be happy or not. Maybe you've been drinking a little bit too much lately and you've been kind of hungover and you've been doing this, up and down, like, so much excitement and joy with the drinking, and then the crash, right? Energy, it becomes a depressant, and that's a bit much. Or maybe it's the foods you're eating. Maybe you're pushing yourself so hard and you're not giving yourself that rest. So, that falls in line with rest and activity. I have them actually separate, and I don't know why I have them separate, because they're not separate. I do think that they're kind of integrated together. But rest and activity. So remember earlier I talked to you about yoga, and I'm a hatha yogi, which means, if you divide the word ha and ta, these, in Sanskrit represent 2 different solar cycles, I guess, the solar and lunar cycles. So ha is the sun, and that's that active energy, and ta is the moon, and that's that restful energy. So when I'm looking at Hatha yoga, and right through our asana series, there's periods of rest, there's periods of activity, and rest and activity, and that mimics that natural cycle in the universe. And again, I've mentioned that before, that to feel really healthy, we need to be giving ourselves both of those. We need to be having designated times of activity for physical fitness. You do need to get your heart rate up. You do need to be moving your body, because there are processes that are going on inside our body. And if we want optimal health, we need to be, moving this body. We need to be eating good, drinking a lot of water, cutting down on alcohol or drugs or smoking, all of those things. Like, people know how to be healthy. We know how to be healthy. But it's that, getting that motivation. And sometimes in that situation, you're going to have to force yourself to get on that healthy train. But rest, I have rest on there because, like I said, oftentimes people are not giving themselves the kind of rest that they need. And we need those periods of time where we have a vacation, where we sit and we don't really do anything. We stare out the window and drink our tea, observe nature around us, just sit outside and breathe in that mother nature, do some grounding. Like I talked about that a little bit earlier. If you're able to, and the weather's cooperative, taking off your shoes, taking off your socks, connecting to Mother Earth, smushing your toes into the sand, into the dirt. There's a real energy in the universe and in the earth, and it wants to support you because we're physical beings and spiritual beings. We need to tap into that energy source. So making sure that you're considering all of these aspects. Where are we going a little sideways with our health? And saying, maybe that's getting in the way of some of my happiness. If I've been hungover for 3 days straight, I'm not going to be the happiest camper, right? So maybe it's time to look at sobriety or just taking a break from drinking. I want you to look at your health as one source of your happiness. Another one we have is finances. I know that seems a little bit odd to throw in here, but it's really key and it's really important to your happiness. I really believe that people only need so much money in this universe. And beyond that certain point, then we just kind of get stupid with money and we're buying things that are really not necessary. But, when you kind of reach that limit, then you're good and you don't have to stress as much. But if you're under that limit, oh man, finances can be a real toll on your happiness. And so it's really important that you're sitting down and you're being honest about your finances. And, maybe your job is not covering your basics, your needs, right? Like we need a fridge full of groceries before we need a Louis Vuitton purse. So those are priorities, but we have to be able to understand what is really super important and core integral to our livelihood and maybe our families, and cover those bases before we start going to all the other stuff, the extra stuff. And so this one, I would love to bring my best friend on the show. Her name is Liz, and we have had so many good talks about money because I think when we first met, we were both terrible with money. So, and this is like 23 years ago. And maybe we're not super honest about it with each other in the beginning. We were in university and we were both kind of like a little bit fascinated with how do you become financially savvy? How do you approach this in the world? And so we started to have a lot of talks together, and we would offer each other resources on how to get out of debt, how to build a savings. And so it became a real natural topic for us to be talking about money often because it just felt like something we both knew nothing about. We came from homes where, they were maybe not always so great with the financial aspect. And we wanted to both be better at it. And so we supported each other with that growth. And it was really nice to have somebody to just be able to talk about those things with because we were both going through it. And so over the years, this has kind of been a thing. And we have often sat and really kind of talked about the things we've learned about money. And so I would love to have her on. I've mentioned this to her that I want to have an episode where we talk about finances, and she would love to, but she's really shy. So if you want that conversation to happen, maybe put it in the comment section. Liz, you have to come on. Let's hear about the money talk. I would love for that to happen. Maybe she just needs a little boost because I'm trying to get her on this episode or on this show. So help me. Liz, let's talk about money. All right. Another one is fun and creativity. There was a time where I'm going to say about maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was really big on the TED Talks. I would watch all of like the best TED Talks, and I really loved these shows and how much they promoted growth. And when there was one episode, I'm not sure who the person was. I can't remember the name of the presenter. They talked about all the aspects of our lives, kind of like what I'm doing right now, and how we need to devote a specific amount of time to them every single week. There was kind of like the schedule laid out, and you had to keep track of all those things. You have personal goals in each of these areas, like career or health or relationships. And then there was one which was kind of like the self one. And so I was kind of doing this tracking of it. And, a little part of me got really sad because after 2 weeks, I realized I was hitting my goals in all of these areas, but the self one, like I would sacrifice myself every single time. So I would be doing everything for my kids or my husband at the time, or work. And I was crushing all of these goals. But when it came to that time to devote to myself for something fun, something creative, something that helped me connect to my spiritual self, I axed it. And I hadn't even noticed because I hadn't, really put any thought or awareness, any consciousness to this until I did this activity. And I was really sad kind of after I reviewed that. And I think that goes to show how often, and I know I wasn't the only one. I know I was not the only mom, the only woman, wife who did this. Like, this is what I would say definitely a lot of women do. Or if you're a single dad, I know that that's definitely going to be another area for yourself. Like the things that we need to do to nurture our self and our joy, those get axed sometimes. And then we're kind of like forcing ourselves to go through life and we're exhausted and we're drained and nothing is filling our cup. And we're just like, this is life. Well, yeah, that means you're probably not going to tap into your happiness because you're not nurturing it. So that's a really big one that I'm going to ask you to look at. What are you doing to promote your fun self, your creative self? Because we all have that self inside of us. And if you're not tapping into the fun things and the happy things, your creative side, then you're going to miss out on a lot of the joy and happiness in this world. And so I want you to really consider that one. The fun, the creative side. So definitely look at that one. Now we're going to move on to relationships. Okay, so now we're going to take stock of all of our relationships. And this is our family, our friendships, our partner, our neighbors, maybe even our school and work families. So I want you to sit and consider, are we okay with all of these relationships? And I'm betting that you're going to end up saying, probably not for some of them. And I think that would be a very honest and normal answer because relationships are very complex and they often involve conflict, where we have different opinions, different perspectives than people who are really close to us. And sometimes we can get caught up in that. And sometimes we need to maybe make a difficult decision. Is this person pushing on your boundaries too much? Is this maybe somebody that you need to make that difficult decision of this is not a healthy relationship for you? Or is this something that you can work on? Because at the end of the day, I truly believe that conflict is always a bid for communication and connection. So maybe these are aspects that we need to work on with that person, whoever it is. And again, if you have been maybe neglecting this relationship or parts of this relationship, then when you do that meditation and you tap into yourself, maybe you're going to see some clarity there. You're going to see some truth and you're going to see this is something that I haven't been addressing. Maybe I've been ignoring this. And maybe I do need to bring this up with this person and work on that. So it's going to be really hard to be happy if we have something that is weighing on us with another person. Now, of course, I know I've told you before, I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more work with conflict on this podcast. And we'll be talking about how to have those difficult conversations, and how do we determine whether this is a relationship we want to continue or not. I will definitely help with that. But for now, I just want you to notice and try and understand, is this something that's salvageable? Are you going to be able to work through this with this person? Because that's going to be a barrier to happiness. If we have this relationship that is active in our life and maybe it's toxic and we're not addressing the toxicity, then, all this work that we're doing on ourselves can just come undone because now we have this huge obstacle. And particularly if it's somebody that you live with, that's going to be a struggle. If it's somebody that you have every single day, you have a lot of interactions with this person, that's going to be a big barrier to your happiness if you're not addressing it and if you're not doing it in a good way. So that's one of them, our relationships. Please look at all of them and decide how can you nurture them too better. And it's not just about conflict, because it is about communication. It is about connection. We want to have the happiest relationships we can with people. A big part of that is accepting people, right? I think a lot of times we really want to change people. We think they should be more like us. And if they were more like us, then they'd be more tolerable, but that's not true. Because if they were more like you probably wouldn't like them. Think about how many times we struggle with ourselves and the parts of ourselves that we don't like. And so if everybody around us was just like us, man, I think we would struggle. So there's beauty in people being different from us. But sometimes that means we have to have maybe a shift in our approach with them, a shift in our attitude towards them. And so that's something to consider. How can we accept these people and how can we celebrate them for being different, right? I think that's really important. When I was a principal, that was a really key part of my management strategy. When I had teachers and I had staff underneath me, that I often really focused on the strengths that other people brought to the table that were different from mine. And I was always so grateful when people were really strong in areas that I wasn't. And so it was really key to identify the things that people could do differently from me. How do we bring this on board? And how do, as a principal, how did we use the skill set to benefit our students, to benefit the school community? And so for me, it was really key to start identifying the things that people were amazing at. And then also to understand, that there are areas that everybody needs to work on, including myself. And to understand, how do we find ways to support this person in that area? How do we find ways, even for myself, how can training help with that? Is there different things that we could do to offset some of those weaknesses and I didn't even like to call them weaknesses. I really like to call them areas that we just need to focus on a little bit more. And that's not to say that there's one version of a perfect person, because that doesn't exist unless you look at Jesus or Creator or something like that. But if we're not bringing attention to some things, sometimes we can be bringing more damage to something. And so it is key that we understand ourselves and the things that if we're not naturally good at this, how do we build on that to make it not so damaging to ourselves or others? Or how do we align with people who can bring their skill set forward so that we don't have to rely on our areas that we need to work on, the areas that we maybe struggle with a bit? So that was something that really was key for me. And then, of course, communication. Communication is so key in our relationships, that we are able to use it effectively. And again, it's to bring that awareness, that connection, that understanding. I don't think that, communication always means talking. I do think that sometimes, just spending time with people, you can have quality time with people and you're not talking all the time. I do think that there are relationships where maybe there's too much talking going on. And sometimes you just need to be present with somebody. And sometimes you just need to be sitting and laughing together. That can be really lovely. It doesn't have to be communication, and connection doesn't mean we have to be constantly talking all the time. Although, especially if you're different, that can help. can help you to understand somebody a little bit better so that we can accept them a little bit sooner. And we're not just like, constantly at odds with that person. And the last circle, the world. Okay, so now if we have focused on ourself and we have looked at all the ways that we can be happier with ourselves, and then we have started to nurture all of those relationships. Now, let's take it a little bit further and let's look at the world. And so, with the world, we're looking at things like our local community, plants, the environment, animals, activism, causes, and social groups. So now we're taking that energy that we have nurtured and cultivated within, and it's growing and growing to include more, which is philanthropy, right? At the end of the day, that's exactly what we're doing. We're filling our own cup so that we can take care of everybody else. And then once we really start pouring that energy, that love, and that happiness into ourselves, we're going to start overflowing with that stuff. You start getting really good at loving yourself and being happy. The natural thing that people want to do is to share that with others. So when we're looking at the world, and some people, they're born activists, and those people always need to be celebrated because we need to have that mindset of taking our energy and taking care of people around us. So if you haven't been doing that so far, and maybe you've been stuck, maybe you've been trapped in a toxic relationship, or maybe you've been struggling with some health issue for a while, it's really hard to think beyond that stuff sometimes. But I think that's the natural point of being a human, that we learn how to take care of others around us. I mean, even spiritually, a lot of spiritual teachers will say you're not really of as much use to the world if you're just off in a cave being spiritual and perfect all by yourself. It's when you're channeling your energy and you're using all of that focus and that good spiritual energy and karma, you're using that in the world, that everybody benefits from it. And so that's the point of a spiritual life, that you are able to bring joy and happiness and help to the world around you. If you're able to start doing that, then you're going to really be starting to tap into that happiness, that natural happiness in yourself. And oh my gosh, once that happens, I'm really excited for you, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It's a lot of hard work. We definitely have to apply ourselves and, like I said, take stock of everything and make sure that everything that we're doing is going to help us, to help ourselves and to help others. Okay, so this is the part where I promised you that I would start talking about creator, and I would start talking about that impact on my life. So if you want to shut this off now because you don't want to hear my spiel about creator, I'm okay with that. Thank you for staying this long. I really appreciate that. But if you say, nope, I'm atheist and proud of that, then that's okay. I'm happy for you too. So you can turn this off now, and then hopefully you come back for another episode. I would really love that. But for everybody else who's staying, that innermost circle, that's creator. And I put creator in the center because for myself, of course, when I meditate so that I can connect to creator. Always do that. Like, my most important and richest relationship in this world is always with creator. And I always say creator is the love of my life. I mean, partners come and go, and I have a wonderful boyfriend right now. Hi, Greg. But at the end of the day, creator comes before anybody, even before my own kids. And the reason I say that is because creator made all of these beautiful people, right? And so for me, that's where I channel and, give a lot of my energy. And so when I'm meditating, I'm connecting to creator, I'm connecting to that source, and I'm maintaining that relationship throughout the day. I'm always talking to creator, and I'm always asking for guidance, asking for signs, thanking creator. Like, I have a very deep relationship with creator, and meditation helps me to tap in. And so I think if you start to nurture that side of yourself, your spiritual side, and of course for me it's creator, for you it might be God, Allah, however you call this entity in the universe, if you're nurturing that relationship, that's where a lot of your happiness comes from. I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently, and she had kind of said to me she was struggling in a relationship with somebody, and she was like, if only they did this and only they did that, then I could be happier. And I said, no, 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 that's not true. And then she was like, well, what do you mean? Then I should just let them do whatever they want. And I'm like, yeah, actually. But I mean, that's a little facetious, I know. But really, at the end of the day, and this is why I always say, if you tap into creator, you maintain that, like, that's a highway of spirituality, right? And when you tap into creator in that sense, it's the source of love. This is the source of truth, of peace, of joy, of happiness, of everything that you could possibly want in the world. That's going to come from creator. And if you tap into that power and you start cultivating that relationship, it's going to naturally pour into you. And you don't have to be looking externally for, proof of love from this person and this person. Does this person love me? Does this person make me happy? And all of that nonsense, because I do think it's nonsense. If you channel all of your energy in this relationship into creator, it will pour into you, and you will have so much. You will be overflowing with love, with joy, with happiness, and then it pours out into the world. That's been my experience, right? And then if I've had times where I'm feeling short on patience, short on any of these things, then I know I haven't been nurturing that relationship with creator. And I know I haven't been maybe, spending time meditating to the extent that I prefer. Because when I'm, on my game, when I'm meditating to a point where I feel so good inside, then I don't need anything from anybody. But I also love people. I really do. And I'm a self-professed introvert. And when I say I'm an introvert, I'm the type of person who needs that strong relationship with creator. I need to be cultivating it. When I'm an introvert, I'm connecting to creator, and then I'm fueling up. I'm fueling up. And then I come to people and I just pour it out. Right? I pour out that love, patience, that kindness, that compassion, all of those good things that, people love from me, and, they thank me for, and it always comes from creator. So if you're feeling like I'm lacking in a lot of happiness, which is why I tuned into this episode, then I say, go back to meditation, go back to, prayer, whatever your religious background is, any of those ceremonies that are going to help you to connect to the source of happiness, which is creator, right? And if you're able to connect to that source of happiness, man, my list, it'll be easy peasy. It won't even mean anything because you have tapped into that channel. But I do still think that this is good to consider a lot of these things. But first and foremost, I will always say, you know what? Connect to creator. If you meditate, connect to creator, nothing else matters. You will be golden. You will feel amazing. It just makes me want to go meditate again. But yeah, so that is today's talk on how to be happier. And I hope it helped you somehow. I hope that, you're able to feel that you have some things you can do, things you can be working on that will help you to find your happy place. And I really believe in you. I think you can do it. So I'm excited for you. Let me know. Keep me posted. I want to know what helped you and maybe what you're struggling with. And of course, for my ladies, I always will share with you my makeup. All right, so these lips are brought to you by Maybelline. This is Superstay Matte Ink in the color Revolutionary and topped with Revolution Shimmer Balm in Sparkle Pink. Okay, those are my lips today. And thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you again soon. Bye. Take care.